now. Hello, my name is Jim Twelves here again, and today is the 9th of July 2026. And as you can see, I've got a friend here, Joy, and our topic is talking about Israel. So I've given Joy a few starting questions, so she's had a think or two about this, but we may or may not stick to the questions. So my first question is something like this. How did you realize that God had a significant plan for Israel? How and when did you realize that God had a significant plan for Israel?
Well, it really goes back to my childhood where I was born before Israel became a state, uh, a nation state. And so when it became a state in 1948, I was 7 years old. And so it was talked about in the home as quite a news thing that was happening in the world. But then I was brought up in a church that, and a school that didn't believe or didn't talk about Israel at all, really, not even as history. And so it wasn't really until I became an adult and started looking at Israel as a place to visit as a Christian, where my Saviour had walked the land and to experience that, which is still on the bucket list but not achieved yet. But it was October 7 really that became the catalyst for me to actually wake up to the fact that Israel lived in the Middle East within a ring of fire of hatred and destruction against it. And I realised, even though I'd known all along that it was God's chosen people, I had never known the importance of it or acknowledged the importance of it. So October 7 was really a wake up for me, and it was then that I went to a rally in Sydney, run by Never Againers now, and I listened to Christians and Jews speak about Israel. I danced and sang with Jewish people with flags, and it was like a set me on the path of acknowledging, of interest, of studying Jewry, and the state of Israel. I followed people on Telegram, on social media. I read, and I spoke with like-minded friends and have developed this passion, as it were, to see the world through a different lens now. The Christian world, the prophetic world. I've I'm still on a journey, and I'm still realizing time and time again that Israel is the time clock of the world, and that we are living in times that we should really be alert to what God is doing.
Joy, I'm particularly interested to hear you say that it was October the 7th that woke you up. So you've been a Christian for, if I may say, a bit of a while before then. And so
Yeah.
you've been in church circles. So in all those years prior to 2023, how did you process the fact that, yeah, you knew the state of Israel had been declared and that they were making a homeland, but what was how did you sort of fit in the culture of your churches?
Well, I grew up in a Presbyterian church, Presbyterian school, and it was there as a teenager, really, that we had what they like a Christian teenagers group of a meeting before church on a Sunday, and it was there that we solved the problems of the world intellectually, and felt really good about that. And it was there I came to the realization that the church had replaced Israel, and the blessings that were for Israel were now for the church. And so it seemed that it wasn't a pointed teaching, it was just an understanding within the church that it wasn't a big deal, that Israel was a sovereign state, but they had lost their blessing because they killed the Son of God. And so the Messiah. And so I just believe that. And when you believe that, Israel becomes a bit of a non-entity. It's not important. The church is your focal thinking. And you know that Jesus was a Jew. You know the Bible was written by Jewish prophets, priests, apostles. You know that its roots were Judaism, and you study it with that understanding, but this permeation of it's not important now sort of puts like a smog over of your understanding of what the role of the church and the role of Israel is, not only in end times, but present times. And so I just grew to understand and believe that. And it wasn't until my later years that I've realised that that is totally wrong. That is an evil thing that started early in the church and has permeated the church and still permeates the church, that the church has now taken over all the blessings and promises in the Word of God that are for Israel.
Joy, when the Six-Day War happened, now I'm old enough to recall that, and I guess you are too. And I remember I was living in England at the time, and I remember being very focused on, hey, this is amazing that Israel is being attacked in whenever it was 1967. And I wondered at the time, I wasn't a Christian then, whether this was going to be the end of the age, because that's, I was aware of Armageddon, and was this going to be the big war? And it ended up being a very quick war, and Israel won. And I remember being elated that they actually ended up with more land than they originally had, which they then gave back. But it was a telling time for me. So for you, was it a time when, oh, well, that's just another war? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I don't even remember thinking about it much. And at that stage, I was a mum with numerous children, and it was like something in the background of not of importance whatsoever. Never gave it much thought time at all. Busy in the church, busy at home, but in churches that never mentioned Israel, not even when Israel was at war. Israel was a non-entity and a subject that, well, even today, when you bring up the subject of Israel, you get pushback, you get walls going up, you can see them going up in front of your eyes, you can feel the conversation change. But in those years, Israel wasn't even mentioned in where we lived and where our life was.
Yeah. So you've mentioned this replacement theology.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure I was ever on your side, as in pre-October the 7th, because I think I've probably never been in the replacement theology thinking. I don't think I have. But for you to have suddenly sort of been transformed out of it into Israel is God's people, God's nation. Talk to me about that revolution that's been happening in the last 2 years, 3 years?
Well, I think it all boils down to education, educating myself and my husband to watching YouTube videos for and against, really delving into talking to people within our church who are interested enough to talk about it. And then go educating ourselves, really. That is the whole thing. Like when I grew up, people talked about end times all the time, because it was after the war and people had looked at the war and thought, this is the end, Jesus will be returning. And so end times was always something that was talked about. But it's really quite weird in the fact that Israel wasn't a integral part of that end times, which is hard to understand from where I sit now, in that the Lord is coming back to Jerusalem, and therefore Jerusalem and the state of Israel needs to be existing for him to be able to do that. So we've just been on a journey of educating ourselves, really, because we realised that we didn't know a great deal about it. We understood, we looked at Revelation numerous times with numerous teachers, but I think Revelation, unless you take your time and really chew it over, and I had read Revelation many times because it says it's a blessing. Those that read it are blessed. And so I thought, I want to be blessed, I'll read it. But my understanding was totally very shallow, shall we say. And so in these last few years, we've spent time, we've listened to different teachers, we've looked at we've educated ourselves. And so now, and we also have family, grown family, who have done the same thing. And so there is this interaction between family members that are really like managing things like, how do you tell teenage kids that the return of Christ, the rapture, we believe we're living in end times. How do you tell them and get them excited to the point where they're expecting it, but they're still planning their careers and working hard at their careers? It's prayerful thing that you have to do to walk that tightrope between expectancy right today and planning for the future. And so that's been a journey as well. And even in our own lives, we don't give up for planning for the future, although we're expecting Christ to rapture us in a very short time. And there's that excitement and that sort of knowledge that you need to be prepared, and
Yeah.
that prayer for people in your lives that aren't prepared. It gives you almost a desperation in as you pray for their salvation. So, but going back to replacement theology, I suddenly realized that I had this mental thing that Israel was not of any great value. And so studying that, I realized that, and also the rise of anti-Semitism, you know, that has been shocking. It's just shocked because, I can remember people talking about concentration camps, and my husband saw men and women return from as prisoners of war, and all that imprinted on young people and the horrors of war. And yet here we are again almost. And it's just hard. The only thing you can attribute that to is to the work of the devil, because he hates the church, he hates Christ, and he hates his people. So I started to investigate what this replacement theology was, and it really took us right back to the early church, really, in the first century, where the leaders are all Jewish. It's a messianic church. And then the Christians are saved, Gentile Christians are saved, and because of the numbers of Gentile Christians and the time frame, the apostles dying, and it becomes almost a non-Jewish leadership in that you have Christians, Gentile Christians then leading the church, and almost immediately they want to step away from the Jewishness of Christianity, which I think is so detrimental. We don't understand how Jewish Christianity is and how the Jewish faith and the Jewish days of celebration and all this sort of thing are so important to the Christian church. And so, I mean, you look at Martin Luther King, who changed the Protestant church, well, was the birth of the Protestant church, but he was really anti-Semitic. So it's been
Martin Luther, I think you mean.
oh yeah, sorry, Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King. Yeah, Martin Luther.
Yeah.
So he did an amazing work of showing the church about grace, the grace of God. But he didn't like the Jews. He hated the Jews. He was anti-Semitic, and it's hard to balance that. And it's obviously a spirit within the church. It
Yeah.
cannot be anything else because it is so prevalent and it is so permeates everything. And when you talk to Christians, people who have been in the church for years and years and years, and you talk to them about Israel, they're surprised because they're uneducated. They, they're not biased in their what thinking. Their thinking is they're just Israel is irrelevant. And
Yeah.
then they look at Israel today and the way they fight and some of the things they do and the settlements and all this sort of thing, and they don't like a lot they see. And yet they admire other things, and so it becomes a bit too hard, so we don't talk about it. Um, and I think this is really sad because the church has lost the ability to talk about things we disagree with in a gracious way. And that is really scary in the fact that why do we get so defensive when we don't agree with someone? And why does it become a you and me thing? Why isn't we love the Lord? Why can't we wrangle this through? And I'm not here to change your point of view, but I'm here to say what my journey has been
Yeah.
and where I'm at. And we've
Oh,
lost
um,
graciousness.
yeah. We've lost patience with each other to talk about things, as you say,
Yeah.
which
We've
is,
also lost a skill.
yeah. And I think it's sad that, and you've put your finger on it, it's the education that's missing. I mean, if we're ignorant about something, we just haven't got the vocabulary to talk about it, which is, all boils down to education.
Yeah.
Look,
And and the confidence that gives you
yes,
in knowing what you're talking about, because when we're not sure what we really believe or understand, we can't speak with confidence.
that's very true. Look, our time is going. I really want to get on to Israel and the Palestinians. Now,
Mhm.
to me, that's a huge area of ignorance on my part. So, if I could, in our summing up, I'd love you to end with what you think about what's happening in Iran and where that should end. But before you go to Iran, can you just give me a couple of ideas of what you're thinking about in terms of how the Jews in Israel should respond, relate with the Palestinians in Israel and in Gaza and the West Bank?
Well, it's like everything, it's a tightrope, isn't it? Because that the Jewish culture values life,
Yes.
whatever life, Muslim life, Arab life, Jewish life. They value life, but then they've got a neighbour who doesn't value life and whose sole aim in life is to eradicate the Jewish nation. So it's a tightrope in the fact that their lives are still valuable,
Yes.
but their actions are abhorrent. And so what do we do with people that we see, like as a Christian, what do we do with people where we see their actions are abhorrent and yet we know God
Mm.
loves them dearly? So therefore, um, what do? You have to pray. You have to um, be wise and discerning, and only God can give you the wisdom you need for something like that. But you also have to protect your people. Like the Jewish nation, the leaders of Israel today, their mandate is to protect their people.
Yeah.
How do they do that?
Now,
Well,
hang on, Joy. Would you say that the solution is a two-state solution?
well, you've really got a two-state solution right now, don't you? You've got Gaza
Mm.
that manages themselves. You've got the West Bank that manages themselves. You've got Israel stuck in the middle who manage themselves. What would be declaring a state change that? What other than they're a state in the United Nations eyes, what does that
Mm.
change? Doesn't change management, doesn't change attitudes. It perhaps
No.
emboldens people.
Yeah.
I don't see it as a solution because I think you've already got it
Right.
in um, in action, perhaps not in name, but you've got it in action now.
Okay. Look, what about Iran and the IRGC? How do you think that's going to all um, develop?
Well, I think you pray for um, they are evil and their aim is to bring the world to become a Muslim world. Um, and prophecy says that Persia will come with um, people from the north, Russia, China, will come against Israel, and Israel will be on its own. No one will be supporting Israel. Um, and that God will give them victory. God will save them. God alone. No one else can, but God alone. So you've got again this tension of praying for peace and praying for the defeat of that shocking evil regime in Iran and the rescue of the people. There's a huge Christian church in Iran, praying for their salvation and to get rid of these rulers. But you know that ultimately evil will prevail and that they will come against Israel. But that doesn't give you an excuse to stop praying. Um, you pray for that underground church in
Yeah.
Iran
Yeah.
because, what else have they got? They have no one in the country to help them. But they're so strong and they're so brave and they're so committed that they'll die for the church. And we sometimes look at the church in the West and think, well, are we prepared to do that?
Mm.
Would we stand that firm? I mean, we can't even stand firm in a coffee shop and talk to
Mm.
people about the Lord, let alone against evil leaders.
Mm. Well, look, Joy, um, have we missed anything that you're dying to share?
Um, not really, other than I think the whole focal point of this is to educate yourself
Mm,
and and to ask the Holy Spirit how to pray
mm.
and who to pray for.
Well, Joy, thank you so much for your time. And I'm on a journey. I mean, you're on a journey. I trust, uh, a word or two might inspire one or two to dig deeper.
Yeah,
Thank you very
that's the nice one.
much.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
All right, bye bye.
Bye.